Announcements. Sound is off. Are we live? Yeah. All right. Woo-hoo. Good evening, everybody. Sorry about that. We had some technical things to figure out. My name is Leah LaRue. I am the Director of Neighborhood Planning for the City of Atlanta's Department of City Planning. I am super excited to be here with y'all tonight. I'm mostly excited that you're joining us tonight, but also very happy to introduce to some and present to others some of my favorite colleagues. First, I'll introduce our Commissioner Janae Prince.
Hi, everybody. I'm so glad that you're here.
And the Director of the Office of Buildings, my colleague, Director Greg Pace.
Good evening, everyone.
And your camera's not on, David, is it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, sorry about that. I didn't see it. I see you now. Okay, yeah. I'll introduce my colleague, David Zaparanik, who is the City Arborist.
Good evening, everybody.
Awesome. All right, y'all, we're going to go ahead and get started. I want to welcome you to our first, and I say first because there will be more, Planning Initiatives webinar. We did this same webinar on Saturday morning. For those who couldn't join us on Saturday, we thought that we would do it again tonight, this evening. So this is the second, but the first of a series of quarterly webinars that we'll be doing to make sure everyone is in the loop on all of the exciting things happening in the Department of City Planning. All right, so first up, we're going to talk about Z2505. That is our party house ordinance. And while the presenter would have been Director Holmes from the Office of Zoning and Development, as some of you know, she is currently attending the Zoning Review Board hearing. So Greg Pace will be filling in on her behalf.
Thank you, Leah, and thank you for the introduction. Good evening again, everyone. I'm excited to be here and to assist in this webinar and try to explain some of the initiatives coming out of the Department of City Planning. Party houses. The party house ordinance is a part of the zoning ordinance, and it requires a vote by the MPU for adoption. The proposed amendment makes it easier to understand and clearer for the Atlanta Police Department to enforce. This ordinance is a part of the zoning code. Again, it requires a vote from the MPUs. And the changes, there's really no changes, but it defines a party house. It makes it much clearer. Whereas a party house is defined as a single family, two family, or multifamily dwelling unit and its premises that is used for private gatherings, including ceremonies, receptions, large-scale gatherings, or parties that charge a fee for the use of the property or for an entry fee, donation, or operation costs from its attendees to gain entry. This ordinance does not include events for 503c3 nonprofit organizations and businesses. The ordinance itself has not changed. It has just been cleared up, updated to clear the language to make it easier to read and understand and be enforced by the police department. And that's pretty much it in a nutshell. It kind of spells out all of the zoning districts that party houses are prohibited and only the districts that are allowed to be able to get a party house and the process where you may be able to obtain what you're required to do to obtain permission for a party house.
Thank you so much, Greg. All right, so then we'll move into the short-term rental licenses ordinance, which is 24-0-1687, short-term rentals.
And the short-term rental ordinance is for MPU review and comment. This ordinance is a licensing ordinance that is an amendment to an original ordinance that was adopted, I believe, in 2021 or 2022. This is a short-term rental regulation, where they can go, who can operate them. It also defines a multifamily complex. It outlines the license requirements, including fees and residencies, and details the locations as far as distance distance restrictions. Some of the changes from the previous to this one are there is now a 1,000-foot distance requirement between short-term rental licenses. There is also now a restriction on density requirements where for multifamily, that's 3 units or more, the maximum amount of short-term rentals allowed is 10% of the total number of units. Any building that has 3 to 10 units are allowed to have at least only 1 short-term rental unit. Anything above 10 requires can be no more than 10%. There's also now a fee increase. It has gone from $150 for 2 within the city of Atlanta to now $250 per license. Additionally, there is no restriction on the number of licenses one can have. They can have a short-term rental agent that can apply for the licenses for them, and they can have any number of them. There's a fee again for each and every one of them. There's also a business license requirement for the short-term rentals, as well as there is a tax requirement. They're subject to Chapter 2, Article 3 of the City of Atlanta Code of Ordinances for hotel taxes or similar. There's also a requirement for a $500,000 liability insurance for these for each of the short-term rental license properties. And there's also now the limit of who can obtain a license. The agent or the owner must reside in one of 13 metro Atlanta counties, which is Fulton, DeKalb, Cobb, Clayton, Gwinnett, Paulding, Henry, Cherokee, Douglas, Rockdale, Fayette, Coweta, or Forsyth County within the metro Atlanta area. Those are the major changes to the ordinance. Again, clearly defining where they can go, distance requirements, density requirements for multifamily, the number of licenses someone can have, and fees that were incorporated for the licenses as well. And that's pretty much it.
Timeline?
Yes, timeline, as you can see here, 45-day public comment period. Well, currently we're having the MPU meetings and presenting them to them. There's going to be before the CDHS and CDHS, forget the date.
On March 25th.
March 25th.
Mhm.
Public comments, of course, this 45-day public comment period, and full council on April the 21st.
Thank you so much, Mr. Pace. And next up, we will start with the tree protection ordinance, which is 24-0-1691. David Zaporanick.
Good evening, everybody, again. Before we get into the changes for the tree protection ordinance, just want to share and remind everybody that there are a lot of benefits to trees. There's been a lot of research done on what trees provide us. They do quite a few things. They filter air pollution filter air pollution. The canopy of the city reduces the temperature of the city, which helps reduce heat island effect. It helps reduce cardiac disease and strokes because it improves quality of air. It protects biodiversity, reduces obesity levels because trees kind of encourage outdoor activities. They manage our stormwater. They increased our neighborhood property values, and they helped reduce stress by interrupting thought patterns that lead to anxiety and depression. A little bit about the history of the tree protection ordinance. The initial one was passed in 2001, and since then we have tried to pass some updates, but they failed in 2014 and 2021. Since 2008, we've actually done several canopy studies that Georgia Tech has done, and what we have learned through the several canopy studies is that we've seen a gradual decline in the city canopy by 1.8%. Right now, it's about 46.5%. The City Council has passed a resolution, or did pass a resolution in 2023 to reach and maintain a canopy coverage of 50%. And as far as some of the recent changes to the tree protection ordinance, there is a phase one that updated the tree protection ordinance with moderate changes. There were some working group meetings that were held between April and August of 2022, and those changes that were agreed upon were adopted by City Council in December of 2022. So now we're in phase two, which are dealing with some of the deeper subjects, the ones that are a little bit difficult, which includes recompense and metrics for saving trees. Go ahead. And because these subjects were a little more contentious, we hired a mediator, Dr. Michael Elliott, who helped us put together a working group that of 24 members, and those 24 members represented 4 caucuses from the development community, from the tree advocacy community, equity and affordable housing community, as well as city agencies and departments. The phase 2 working group recommendations, there were 5 of them. One was to establish distinct preservation and planting standards for single-family subdivision and greenfield developments, while allowing for an alternative performance standard, increase recompense with reductions for on-site tree practices and high-priority city goals, to provide sufficient resources for a robust public forestry program, establish standards for commercial, multifamily, and mixed-use developments, establish a more robust public forestry program to support preservation, planting, and maintenance of the urban forest, and lastly, to improve administrative decision processes, transparency, and enforcement. There aren't any specific things in the proposed ordinance that are reflected in number 4 and 5, but they did help us guide us in shaping the tree protection ordinance. So getting into one of the changes that are proposed is how trees are valued. Right now, all trees are valued the same way based on the size, and they are required to be replaced inch for inch. And what's proposed is to categorize trees to determine whether they are priority trees or non-priority trees. Priority trees are the ones that are considered more environmentally valuable, and that is the characteristics for putting them in the priority tree group is the species and the size. And these trees have more protections than the non-priority trees. Non-priority trees are replaced. The priority trees are required to be replaced inch for inch, but non-priority trees are replaced at a lower rate, which is a half an inch for every inch removed. For example, if you have a 20-inch priority tree, you would be required to replace 20 inches of new trees. And if you have a 16-inch non-priority tree, then you would be required to replant 8 inches of new trees. Another thing that has changed is the recompense. Currently, the recompense calculation was established when the ordinance was adopted back in 2001, and that is they are charged at $100 per tree and $30 per inch. And recompense, and just to go over a little bit about what recompense is, it is the alternative for meeting the replanting requirement for trees cut on private property, which means that if we do require trees to be planted on the property for a construction project, but sometimes because of spacing requirements, we can't, there's not enough space to replant all of the inches. So whatever can't be planted on the property, the balance of that is what is translated into recompense, and that's what's owed to the Tree Trust Fund, which helps support plantings, maintenance, and management of Atlanta's urban forest. So what we are proposing is a more simplified formula, which is basically just $260 per inch. And that will be phased in over 4 years, and it will start at the beginning of each year. There are incentives for affordable housing and protected conservation areas that can decrease the cost of the recompense owed. Some other changes are the changes to the single-family standards. Currently, trees are protected. Trees that are in the setback are currently protected. In the proposed standards, the priority trees are the more valuable trees, and there are two options that projects will have that they would have to meet in order to get a permit. The first option is to preserve a certain percentage of DBH inches of priority trees, and that depends on the lot size, meaning the smaller lots have a smaller percentage of priority trees that are required to be saved, and the larger lots have a little bit of a larger percentage that's required to be saved. But if that preservation cannot be met, or that preservation standard can't be met, then you have to use option 2, which is a limited area of disturbance, and that area of disturbance is equal to the zoning allowed lot coverage. And why are the single-family residential standards important? Through the canopy studies that we've done, we have known that about 76% of the city's canopy is on single-family developments. And since they have the lowest development intensity, that's why we came up with these requirements for saving trees on private property. And also, in these canopy studies that were done between 2008 and 2018, we noticed that the single-family redevelopments had the single largest category of canopy loss. On the table to the right that you see on your screen, this is from one of the canopy studies. And what it's trying to show you is if single-family lots were built out to the maximum lot coverage, let's say for 100% of the lot coverage, then we would lose almost 15,000 acres of trees, which would amount to about a 37% decrease in canopy loss. Another change is to the single-family subdivisions. Currently, there are two processes for single-family subdivisions. The first permit is called a land disturbance permit, where just the infrastructure is, the scope of work for the land disturbance permit is infrastructure like roads and utilities. And that is still, and then the second phase will be for pulling building permits for the individual houses. In option 1, it still follows the same process, meaning, let me go back a little bit. So currently, the infrastructure, the recompense for the land disturbance permit is an infrastructure maximum cap, or infrastructure cap, where it caps how much recompense is charged for removing trees, and it's based on acreage. Now, what is going to change is in option 1, where you still have to get a land disturbance permit, but all of the trees in that land disturbance permit will have to be replaced or recompensed. And then once you get to the construction of each individual lot, then they would have to follow the single-family preservation standards. In option 2, there would be a permanent conservation area established equaling 50% of the site, and the trees that are preserved in perpetuity and count towards replacement trees, and no additional preservation will be required during the construction phase. Changes to the commercial, mixed-use, multifamily, and industrial developments. The proposed new standards is that the planning standards are based on the intensity of the development to ensure adequate canopy on all sites. And what that means is the density of trees that are required, or the tree density requirements that will be needed on the site. And what we are proposing is on these parcels, there would be a standard of 20 trees per acre for the developed portion of the site, as well as the undeveloped portion of the site. In the developed portion of the site, you would subtract out the footprints of structures, permanent body of water, roads, things like that, and when you subtract all that square footage out, that you use the net square footage to calculate how many trees are actually required for that particular parcel. You can preserve priority trees growing on site to qualify for reduced planting density requirements. And for development on green fields, you'd be required to protect 30% of the property in a preservation area. And a green field is a parcel that is 5 acres or more, and it has a full canopy, meaning that it hasn't been developed before. Tree replacement for public projects. Trees that are removed for public property can offset recompense requirements with project expenses related to better tree planting and forest management. And what that means is that when you have a parcel that's being developed on public property, you're still required to meet all of the tree density requirements, but you're not required to plant off-site. Instead, the recompense that would be calculated to plant those trees off-site can be applied to the better tree planting or forest management practices. And an example of a tree planting project would be like if you're in an urban area and you're gonna plant trees in an existing sidewalk, you would have to remove some concrete, put in soil cells, and add some special soil to that planting area. An example of a forest management project is like removing invasive exotic plants. For affordable housing, there are partial and full waivers of off-site replacement plantings, and recompense are available to affordable housing developments that meet the required thresholds. 50 to 100 and 100% waivers are available depending on the percentage of units meeting the area median income requirements. Another change or addition to what's proposed in the ordinance is a registration program for professionals. And what this means is that any tree company, landscape architect, forester, or arborist who submits applications to cut trees or submit applications that inform tree-related permits would be required to register with the city, which is free. They would have to register annually at the beginning of each new year. This allows for better enforcement, and with the enforcement, if there are applications that are submitted that are erroneous, or let's say a tree company submits an application or doesn't submit an application to cut a tree down, meaning they remove it illegally, then the first infraction is that they would be given a verbal warning or a written warning, and any infractions after that would be they would be suspended from the registry for a certain amount of time. And as far as the legislative process, the original document legislation was submitted to City Council in December. There was a substitute submitted on January 28th. And as you know, we are meeting with you guys in the NPU meetings in February and March to answer any questions that you may have. And there is an associated administrative setback variance that goes along with this tree protection ordinance, which I'll go over here in a minute, but that has to go through the zoning review board and then onto the zoning committee. And then there'll be a working group meeting or a working session in the CDHS committee in March or April. And then we anticipate full council vote in April or May. So on to the administrative setback variance. So this is a proposed amendment to the zoning ordinance. And because it's in the zoning ordinance, it requires a vote by the NPUs, and we will be there to answer questions about this as well. And what it is presenting or proposing is to add additional design flexibility to preserve priority trees, allowing it, what we are proposing is to have this as an administrative process that involves the city arborist and the Office of Zoning and Development. Because it's an administrative variance, it will not, these changes or approvals to the variance will not go to the Board of Zoning and Adjustment. And what this variance allows is a reduction of the side setback up to 50% to allow a structure or a house to be scooched over one way or the other, and it's to protect priority trees. We have heard, we've had some comments about some of the things about the ordinance, and we appreciate the comments. We have inadvertently not included some things and just wanted to clear a few things up. In the original, and what has been submitted, it refers to just 6-inch trees that are protected, but we will be revising that to say priority trees are the ones that are going to be saved. And the setbacks only refer to side setbacks. It doesn't refer to front and rear yard setbacks.
All right, everybody. Let me get my camera back on. All right, so we thank you so much for participating in this presentation. I wanted to add, before we move into Q&A, a couple of items. Number one, our leadership, as we pointed out in some of the NPU meetings, some of you may be aware, but our commissioner and deputy commissioners have committed to attending every NPU meeting in February. I want to make that clear. I know some of you have already welcomed them to your NPU meetings, but if you haven't met yet, you will absolutely see one of these three faces at your NPU meeting. I think there might be one or two exceptions where we have multiple meetings in one night and they haven't quite, for reasons I don't understand, they haven't figured out how to clone themselves yet. I wish they would hurry up and figure that out. But until then, we'll probably have someone else from our leadership team attending in their stead. But if you have questions, I'm stalling just a bit so you can jot down the email addresses and telephone numbers that are on the screen in front of you. If you have questions about party houses after this session, if anything else comes up, please feel free to reach out to Director Kieta Holmes at kmholmes@atlantaga.gov or 404-615-6612. If you have questions about short-term rentals, please feel free to reach out to Director Gregory Pace at gpace@atlantaga.gov or 404-330-6147. And if you have questions about the tree protection ordinance, please reach out to the city arborist, David Zaparanik, at dzaparanik@atlantaga.gov or 404-865-8489. Okay, let me stop sharing my screen so I can see here. Okay, so I wanted to talk real briefly about the opportunities for engagement, and then we'll get into Q&A. You have, as I mentioned, these 4 items that were discussed tonight will appear on the MPU agendas. So one of them will appear on your agenda in February and March. That's the tree protection ordinance administrative variance. The creation of the administrative setback variance will be on your agenda in February and in March. For the other items, they will appear on your agenda in February. You will have the opportunity then to discuss this further with your planner. We'll also have subject matter experts attending your MPU meeting. So if you have questions that have not been answered, you can submit those. We do ask that you, if you are a zoning committee chairperson for your MPU, or you are the chairperson of your MPU, we definitely ask that you send us those questions in advance so that we can attend your meeting already prepared and ready to answer any questions, so that when the time comes for you all to vote, you feel comfortable doing so. It would be helpful, of course, to submit those questions in advance. We're also curating a document of some of the most frequently asked questions that we've gotten between the webinar on Saturday, the webinar tonight, and the roadshow that we've been doing the past couple of weeks. We'll curate a document with those frequently asked questions and upload that to our website as well. Staff is going to drop a link in the chat right now for the Planning Initiatives webpage on our website. That site is where you will be able to find all things related to all of these ordinances. So you'll find the ordinances themselves, you'll find the fact sheets, you'll also find contact information for where you can ask us any other questions. And once the webinar is uploaded, you'll be able to find the link to that on that page, as well as the frequently asked questions. And again, everything there is to know about these ordinances will be on that page, which is at the link that staff will drop into the chat. The last thing I want to point out is that it's now 6:35. I think we moved through the webinar pretty well. That leaves us about an hour and 25 minutes for Q&A. We will take as many questions as we possibly can. If there are questions that we're not able to get to tonight, we will still record those questions and we'll either get the answers back to you, or we'll post them on the website. I think probably the latter. But I'm going to go ahead and open up Q&A. If you have a question, please make sure you add it. You can find Q&A at the bottom of your screen. You should see a button with a little question mark that says Q&A. If you click on that, you'll be able to ask your question. All right, the first question that I see is, how is the enforcement agency going to be able to determine if the event in question is for a 501c3 nonprofit at the time of the incident? Director Pace.
The ordinance doesn't allow for party houses are prohibited in most of your single family zoning districts. And so in order for an event to be taking place, that when it's investigated, that owner would need to provide a copy of their 503c license. There's also a requirement for those properties that are allowed, the zoning districts that do allow for party houses, there's a requirement for a special use permit and a special administrative permit, one of the two, for them to get in advance. So if they haven't received either of those and do not have it readily available, the 503c license proof, then the enforcement will take place and citations will be issued at the time. Correction notices, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Greg. And why are nonprofits, political, et cetera, excluded from party house rules?
That's more of a legal question. I believe that it was for nonprofit organizations to have fundraisers and things of that nature. And usually those are not as disruptive, so to speak, as some of the others that take place with that tend to disrupt the fabric of the neighborhoods.
All right, thank you so much. Also regarding short-term rentals, can you help us understand why there is a 1,000-foot distance requirement, and how was that determined?
There was,
That one?
yeah, go ahead, if you don't mind, 'cause
Okay, well, the answer is there was a little bit of trial and error on this. We considered several different distance requirements. What we were afraid of is we would get a whole bunch of short-term rentals on one street. So we originally drafted an ordinance that had a 2,000 feet separation. And we had several public hearings on that and a 3-hour-long work session. And what we heard back was that it wasn't strict enough. So we went with the 1,000 feet, and we feel like that's a good distance to keep too many short-term rentals from being on the same block.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Prince. Why is Atlanta residency not required? This is obviously related to short-term rental.
That's a legal question, but there is recent case law that says that we cannot tie the licenses, the short-term rental licenses, to where a person lives.
All right, thank you. Okay, Commissioner Prince, while we have you on, I'll ask another question for you. Are y'all taking feedback and making changes to any of these ordinances?
Well, that's why we're here, right? We want to hear from you. We need to hear from you. Is there something we missed? Is there something that needs to be changed? So let us know if you see something. We do have the ability to introduce a substitute ordinance if we find something that it was a mistake or needs to be fixed.
All right, thank you so much, Commissioner. David, what is the margin of error on the GT canopy assessment?
I don't know what the margin of error was on the canopy assessment, but there have been 3 canopy assessments done, and the results or a summary of each of those canopy assessments are available on atlantagA.gov. If you go to the Department of City Planning, you should be able to drill down to where you can find the summary of those canopy studies.
Awesome, thank you, David. Has any consideration been given to the first come, first served nature of the 1,000-foot separation requirement between short-term rentals that would possibly exclude current residents from ever getting a chance to enter this market on their occupied property due to other residents or business ventures that flood the area?
Yes, there was some consideration, but what we did not want to do is create what is considered similar to a lottery type of a program where people would have to submit and then a drawing would be made as to who can obtain a license and who couldn't. So the first come, first served base process was the better suited at the time.
And I can add to that a little bit also. Right now, under the current ordinance, there isn't a 1,000 feet separation. So if you already have your license, when the new ordinance goes into effect, you would basically be grandfathered. And as long as you renew timely, you could keep going. You would not be subject to the separation requirements.
Thank you, Commissioner, and thank you, Director Pace. David, this next question is for you, related to the working groups that you had. Who was in each of the caucuses? Or can you give a little information on their backgrounds? Commissioner or David, who was in each of those groups that y'all had Can you give a little information on their backgrounds?
So we had, let's see, for the tree advocacy community, we had representatives from Trees Atlanta, and I'm not going to remember them all, y'all. We had the representatives from Trees Atlanta. We had city staff, so all of our arborist staff were in there. We had people from the affordable housing and equity community whose names are escaping me. And we had some other people from the development community, and I remember those. It was Jim Cheeks and Kevin Norton from Empire Homes. And Kevin Norton has a civil engineering background, so that was really helpful for us in the technical sense.
Awesome, thank you very much. And do the standards y'all are establishing differ depending on, so I'm gonna ask the person who asked that question, if you could clarify for me which ordinance your question is related to, and then we'll come back to that question if you don't mind. Where can someone find the most up-to-date version of the proposed TPO? So I can add to that that this item is appearing on every NPU agenda, and I'm just going to take a moment of personal privilege to plug in for all of you that may not have known. Since you all started meeting virtually a few years ago, we find that fewer people are actually using your NPU agendas. You're relying on the chairperson to pull it up on the screen. But the actual NPU agenda, which is posted on the city's website, has links to every single application that you will vote on. Every month, there are links to those applications hyperlinked into your agendas. In addition to that, there are also links to any ordinances, links to the fact sheets, et cetera. That is always on your NPU agenda. The NPU agenda is always on the city's website. Additionally, that link that staff put in the chat, also on that page, you will also be able to find the link to the proposed TPO. And I don't know if there's any other location that I left out, but you can find it on that website for sure, and you can find it linked to your NPU. All righty, next, trees. Is there a maximum size limit to trees where they would be considered a hazard?
The short answer is there is not a maximum size limit to trees. For a tree to be considered dead-dying or hazardous, it is based on the health of the tree. So, any size tree could actually be considered dead-dying or hazardous, and a inspection request should be submitted for a field arborist to go out and assess the tree. But no, there's no maximum size to when a tree would be considered a hazard.
Thank you. And how much money is in the tree trust fund now?
Gotta check.
We'll have to check and get back to you on that one. Party house. Why would anyone apply for a party house license? Why would the city allow party house licenses? And are party houses allowed under current code?
Let's see, it's a three-part question. Party house, well, the party house ordinance was adopted to kind of curtail the influx that we were having, especially during COVID. People were constantly using their own homes and mostly short-term rental homes to have parties, events, and things of that nature, which disrupted the neighborhood. So that's one of the reasons why someone would want to license one now, if they were intending to use it temporarily for that type of event. And it depends on the zoning district that allows it. Otherwise, they're not allowed. They're only allowed in mostly commercial districts. And so they're not allowed in the residential districts. And that's under the current code. Again, this amendment is not a change. It just clarifies and puts clearer language for it to be easier for the Atlanta Police Department to enforce.
All right, thank you so much.
Leah, I have the working group list now.
Okay,
Hold
great.
up.
So we're going back to the working group question for the TPO.
Could I-
Commissioner Prince?
Could I share my screen?
Yes, you should be
Okay.
able to.
All right, so I have the exact list, which is great. Or not. Ay, ay, ay. Working group, there we go. Wow, can y'all see those? Can y'all see those names?
Yes, and for those that may not be able to view the screen, I will read quickly. Jim Cheeks, Darian Dunn. Jim Cheeks is the owner, representing the Greater Atlanta Home Builders Association. Darian Dunn, Atlanta Apartment Association. Zach Gober, Atlanta Realtor Association. Nabil Hammam, co-chair of the Atlanta Tree Commission. Kevin Norton, vice president of Empire Communities, and I'm sorry, representing the Council for Quality Growth. Cody Zanny, landscape architect with Kimberly Horn. From the tree advocacy community, is that in the right order? Dalil Anthony, okay, Dalil Anthony, the founder of Tree Next Door. Tierson Butte, certified arborist and founder of Butte Trees. Please forgive me if I'm mispronouncing any of these names. It's my first time seeing this list, so bear with me. Howard Katzman, building performance consultant. Catherine Kolb, Eco Addendum. Greg Levine, Trees Atlanta. Judy Yee, Trees Atlanta. Brian Finley, Atlanta Habitat for Humanity. Nataki Osborne Jeltz, Wawa. Roberto Morales Roman, Partnership for Southern Equity. John Skatch, Atlanta Housing. Rose Connolly from the Department of Watershed Management, Director of Site Development. Kathy Evans, Atlanta Tree Commission. Taryn Heidel, Department of Parks and Recreation, Senior Arborist there. Tamara Latang, Department of City Planning. Susan Rutherford from the Mayor's Office. Andrew Walter from the Department of City Planning. Michelle Wynn from the Atlanta Department of Transportation. And the City Arborist, David Zaparanik from the Department of City Planning. Thank you very much, Commissioner. Appreciate that. All righty. The next question we have, is there any chance that the state of Georgia will increase the caps on misdemeanors from 1,000 to say 10,000? This is related to the tree protection ordinance. And is there any way to get judges to impose maximum fines? Until developers are looking at $50,000 to $100,000 fines, they're going to continue to cut down trees illegally. Any efforts by our department to lobby the state and the magistrate courts?
So the city's intergovernmental coordinator knows that this is the department's, I guess, about our top legislative priority for this year. And I know that some of you have connections at the state capitol. So talk to your friends there, help us out.
Thank you so much. Where can someone find the definition of priority trees?
Right in the ordinance. David will read it to you.
Yes, the definition of the priority tree is in the tree protection ordinance, and it's in the vocabulary section, which is near the last, it's at the end of the ordinance. And the definition reads, trees that provide the highest level of ecosystem services to the city of Atlanta and are defined by size and species as listed in table TPO-1. And that means that the list of trees is in the ordinance. So once you get a copy of the tree protection ordinance, you can see the different categories of priority trees in there.
Thank you so much. Is the recompense used for planting the trees somewhere else? Seems like just a fine for cutting down trees.
Yes, the recompense is used for planting trees. It's also used for buying property that is that has canopy coverage as well.
Awesome, thank you. And I think you can probably keep your camera on for a bit, David. As of Monday, Trees Atlanta was unaware of movement on the tree ordinance rewrite. I'm trying to get to the question. Can you tell me why this major revision is only getting a 2-month review now when it was so widely discussed previously?
Michael, are you affiliated with Trees Atlanta? I guess I'm wondering about how they could not know when they were on the working group. And I believe the project manager, Andrew Walters, sent out the ordinance to the members of the working group. David, you might be able to speak to that when the ordinance was sent out.
I don't know when that happened.
Okay. Trees Atlanta was on the group that wrote the ordinance, and they have reached out to me to set up a meeting. They have emailed me their reaction to the ordinance with some documents attached. So
There were also at least one representative on the webinar on Saturday, this past Saturday, which was before Monday. So, yeah. Michael, I can tell you at least a representative attended the webinar on Saturday. I can't speak to when they may have been advised or what participation they had, but they were here on Saturday. All right, where can someone find the preservation percentage proposed?
So that's also in the tree protection ordinance, and there is a table that is in the tree protection ordinance, and it lists, it divides or categorizes and it's categorized by the size of the property. So it goes from very small to very large properties, and there's maybe 6 or 7 categories. And the table provides the preservation percentage of priority trees. It provides the limit of disturbance area. And I list one more thing, but I can't think of what that is. You can go to the next question.
Okay, thank you. If you haven't submitted a question, but you plan to, if you could just tell us using maybe STR for short-term rental, PH for party house, or you can just write trees or TPO, just so we can get the context behind the question. Some of them are not as clear as others. All right, moving on. Does this change standards and costs for granting permits submitted for trees on private property?
Yes, it does change the standards. Right now, the standards for approving or denying trees is based on whether they're in the setback or not. In the proposed ordinance, again, it depends on, they have to use one of the options of the percentage of priority trees that are required to be saved. And if that can't be met, then they have to go to option 2, which is a limit of disturbance area. And the costs will go up because we are proposing the recompense to go up to $260 per inch. And I didn't mention this before, but what we are proposing is basically to cover the cost that it costs the city to plant trees.
Thank you so much for that thorough answer, David. Since our canopy is going in the wrong direction, will you consider calculating canopy coverage percentage every year rather than every 5 years?
Probably not. We have it in the proposed ordinance that it will be done every 5 years, but other than that, it actually takes more than a year to actually get all of it done. Yeah, it just takes longer. It even just takes longer than a year just to get the canopy summary. So no, we're not thinking of going to every year.
All right, thank you. Regarding short-term rentals, do multifamily currently have a maximum units allowed? And does the proposed multifamily 10% only apply to single-owner apartments or multi-owner condo buildings?
Currently, the ordinance doesn't specifically address multifamily units, which is why this ordinance clears that up. And the proposal of multifamily for 10%, it applies to all multifamily structures.
Awesome, thank you. This table on single-family lots, is that showing if every lot, including ones that are already built, were to be demoed and rebuilt to maximum lot coverage? Can you also show what percentage of lots have a permit?
The table I think that you're talking about or referring to is on the slide where I was sharing that in an example of if all the lots were built out to 100% allowed lot coverage, that we would lose up to 15,000 acres of trees. And the question is, is it showing if every lot were to be demoed and rebuilt to? Yeah, so the answer to that question is yes, it is showing that if every lot were demoed and rebuilt to maximum lot coverage. Can y'all show what percentage of lots have a permit? I don't have it with me or don't have it available. So I wouldn't be able to provide that at this time.
Thank you. Can both units in a duplex be short-term rental?
Yes, they can.
Thank you. Is there a list of newly determined high-value trees available?
So high-value trees are the same as priority trees. And as we've mentioned, the list of priority trees is in a table in the proposed ordinance.
All righty, thank you. For multifamily, I guess. For multifamily, are the standards related to proximity to transit or other amenities or a different context? Midtown, what standards? Is this related to short-term rental standards? Or, yeah, I'm sorry, if you don't mind just clarifying whether your question is for short-term rentals, party house legislation, or the tree protection ordinance, we'll come right back to that question. For TPO, trees in single-family properties are not approved for removal, even though they will eventually pose a risk. Specifically, poplar trees are constantly shedding limbs and causing damage across property lines, but they are not approved for removal because they are not dead. How do we work around this?
Hiring private tree companies to maintain the trees. They will be able to do a full assessment, and they will be able to remove any limbs that they think need to be removed, which would help eliminate limbs just falling on their own.
Thank you. I learned something there too. Thank you.
And something else to add is that, let me try my camera so they know who's talking or if it will even come back on. Okay. Actually, we have received a lot of questions about the dead, dying, and hazardous trees. And something that's come up recently, and I mean very, very recently, is the question about insurance companies insisting that certain trees be taken down, even when our arborists find them to be healthy. So this might be something that we need to take a closer look at.
Mhm. Thank you so much, Commissioner, and thank you, David. Do affordable housing projects get a waiver from the preservation requirements?
It depends on what kind of parcel they're building on. On single-family lots, there is a requirement to preserve trees. If it's a green field, you're required to preserve 30% of the property. On commercial properties, there is not a preservation requirement, but there is an incentive if you put some of the land in a conservation easement.
Thank you so much. Who and what initiates the administrative authority to reduce setbacks by up to 50%? Is it the developer or does the city arborist initiate? If it is developers, are you concerned that developers will abuse this administrative process to get the setback reduced, then still cut trees down and pay the fines?
Can you answer the first part?
I'll read the question again.
So, oh, I got it.
Oh, you got it.
Yeah,
Okay.
sorry. So the property owner would have to request the administrative variance, and staff would have the authority to grant the administrative variance. See what else? Are we concerned about them abusing it? So it's only to save priority trees that are 6 inches in diameter or greater. So this is going to be something that probably won't happen very often. And there is a very black and white standard on this. There is always the possibility of developers illegally taking down trees, and that's why we need to work on those fines at the state capitol.
All righty, so let's talk a little bit about what sounds like code enforcement. When investors are flipping homes, they cut down the trees and tuck them in the back of the yard. The city of Atlanta cites the owner, but doesn't require them to clean up the tree or doesn't force them to clean up the tree. Why are offenders not required to clean it up?
The best I can answer this would be, unfortunately, we have several different enforcement agencies. The fine and the citation and the fine is related to the actual destruction and cutting up the trees. Generally, cleanup and debris, or most of the times it's for junk vehicles that code enforcement would enforce that. I don't know that there is a ordinance in place that requires someone to clean up trees, natural vegetation, outside of grass being too high.
Awesome, thank you. Will changes be made between NPU review and the council vote? Commissioner?
So this is a question on all of the ordinances?
Presumably.
Okay, so through the legislative process, changes can be made. If it comes out that we have missed something, for example, we know that in the administrative variance ordinance that we left out the words side yard, or we left those words out. And we need to make sure that that's in there. Now, I can't just go into the CDHS, the committee meeting, and say, oh, guys, we left this out. I have to bring them what's called a substitute ordinance that has all the corrections. So there is an opportunity in the process to make changes or corrections. And City Council also has the ability to propose changes or corrections. So yes, that can happen. I don't say it will happen, but I'm saying that it can. And you've probably seen it happen on other ordinances in the past. So, I mean, we already know we left the words side yard out of that ordinance. So we're gonna fix that.
Awesome, thank you. The tree fund is not to be used for annual maintenance beyond the first year of planting, etc. Why does the tree fund pay for trimming and pruning crews for the Parks Department? It seems as though the tree fund is being used as a general fund for the Parks Department.
Well, I mean, the code says what it's allowed to be used for.
But the Parks Department gets their own budget from the general fund from the city too.
Right. It might seem like something different, but the law tells us what we can and can't do.
All righty, thank you. For the newbies, what's an MPU? I paid Mr. Goodison to ask that question. Just kidding, just kidding. I'm so glad you asked, Mr. Goodison. I'm kidding. The MPU stands for Neighborhood Planning Units. Last year, we celebrated 50 years of existence. This is a system that was created in 1974 to give residents a voice in government, to give residents specifically a voice at Atlanta City Hall. NPUs are comprised of various numbers of neighborhoods. There are 25 of them in the city. No matter where you live in the city of Atlanta, or no matter where you do business in the city of Atlanta, if it is indeed in Atlanta, you are a part of an NPU. We can help you find your NPU. If you don't know what it is, we'll share a link as well where you can look up your address and find your NPU, or you can just reach out to us and we'll tell you which NPU you're in. But each month the NPUs gather to review various ordinances, various applications, and then make a recommendation to the city of Atlanta to either approve that application, to oppose that application, or to support legislation or not support legislation. So the MPUs gather each month to make recommendations to the city of Atlanta, to the mayor's office, to the council, to the city departments on how we function as a government. Thank you so much for asking that question. I loved having the opportunity to answer that. All right, next question. How will, regarding short-term rentals, how will this be legally enforced? If an owner leases out a property and then the tenant rents without a license, who's getting fined? Will the owner or tenant be responsible? It seems like a legal mess.
Great question. In a nutshell, the owner of the property is legally responsible for that property. We have the ability to cite the owner and or responsible party of the property.
That's it?
That's it.
Okay.
Both the owner and or the tenant can be cited. That's correct.
Thank you.
Mhm.
All right. Does this mean that side setbacks can be changed without publication to all neighbors and to the MPU and without a public hearing such as BZA?
For the express purpose of saving trees that are 6 inches in diameter and our priority tree, that is the kind of trees we like to save, native trees, high value trees, high canopy trees, the good trees. An administrative variance is one that goes through staff and not to the Board of Zoning Appeals. Lots of cities and counties in Georgia have administrative variance processes for very specific reasons. We are proposing an administrative variance process only to save trees, priority trees that are 6 inches or larger in the side yard setback.
Awesome, thank you. I just want to do a quick time check. It is just about 7:15 and we have 46 questions that remain. I haven't looked through all of them yet. I'm kind of taking them one by one, but I just want to say that if any of you have put a comment in the chat, what I will do, what I did on Saturday, is skip over that for now, leave it until the end, and then if time permits, we'll read the comments aloud at the end. But right now we want to try to get to as many questions as we possibly can. Our staff is also dropping in the chat a link to the MPU agendas page where you can find all of the information about your own MPU, and you can find the agenda for your February meetings as they are published 1 week before the meeting. So you'll be able to link to all of the materials that we've referenced here. All right, when considering B corps, such as Shades of Green Permaculture, that has done much of the development of green spaces for places like Monday Night Garage, when they may be taking out trees, but putting in other more beneficial plants that manage the water and add food to the landscape, what exceptions have been considered for the regulations mentioned?
That's a good question, but during the working group meetings, we did not, that subject did not come up, so it was not discussed.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, Michael. I'll read that at the end if we get to it. Regarding the tree canopy, what initiative is the city engaging in to increase the tree cover on public property?
One of the things that we are doing is purchasing property to preserve it in perpetuity, and those parcels are undeveloped and have a full canopy.
Awesome, thank you. So could someone get a license next door to a house that has been operating a short-term rental for years with no issues? And would that make the one that has been operating for a while not able to get a license?
Kind of confused on the question. What I will state is if someone legally has a short-term rental license issued by the city of Atlanta, they would be grandfathered in under the new ordinance. If they're neighboring short-term rental properties that both legally have a short-term rental license, they both will be legally non-conforming or grandfathered in and allowed to continue to operate. However, if one has a license, a legal city of Atlanta short-term rental license, and the other does not, and the other seeks to apply after this proposed ordinance passes, it will be within 1,000 feet of the other issued license, and therefore would not be granted a short-term rental license.
I think that answers the next question as well. So I'll move on to what safety standards, such as fire alarm, carbon monoxide detectors, et cetera, are required for short-term rentals? What parking regulations would apply to short-term rentals?
So there were we did not put any standards as far as carbon monoxide, fire alarms, et cetera. Those are generally required, not just carbon monoxide, but fire alarms. Smoke detectors are usually required for all single-family houses within the city of Atlanta for the past, I want to say, 20, 25 years for new construction. As far as the parking requirement, the parking requirements have not really been changed or addressed. All parking must be on site. There's a limit to the number of persons per bedroom, which is 2 per bedroom. So essentially, they would have to try to provide parking on site, on the property.
Are the requirements for tree replacement for affordable housing less stringent than for other developments, leaving affordable communities with fewer trees?
No, the answer to that is no. Affordable housing developments would still be required to have the same tree density per acre as any other commercial, multifamily, industrial developments.
Thank you. Is there, Greg, grandfather eligibility for short-term rentals that do not currently have a license?
If they do not currently, if a structure does not currently have a short-term rental license, it cannot be grandfathered in. They would need to have a license issued by the city of Atlanta to be grandfathered.
One Airbnb for every length or every 4 to 5 blocks seems like a really long distance. Can NPUs or neighborhoods decide on their own distances between Airbnbs?
The distance requirements in this ordinance was established for the entire city of Atlanta. This may be a recommendation that can be made, but at this present time, we didn't propose it to be set based on the neighborhood. We decided to have one consistent short-term rental regulation.
How do you plan on enforcing that ordinance, short-term rental ordinance? Will the cost of enforcement fall on the taxpayer?
Enforcement will be twofold. If they do not have a license, that will fall up under the Department of City Planning within our zoning enforcement division. If they have an active short-term rental license, the Atlanta Police Department would enforce that, and those that are in violation of that are adjudicated for any violations run the risk of losing or having their short-term rental license revoked.
And regarding the 10% in multifamily, can those still be grandfathered in?
If they have a legally issued license from the city of Atlanta, short-term rental license from the city of Atlanta, yes.
We answered that question already. Where can we submit a tree inspection request?
There are many different types of inspections in the arborist division. There's inspections for dead, dying, and hazardous inspections. There's final arborist inspections. I'm going to assume from the context that it might be for dead, dying, and hazardous trees. And there is, if you go to the arborist division webpage, there is a link to forms and checklists. And if you go to the folder under arborist that is titled Construction and Trees, there are actually dead, dying, and there's a folder called Dead, Dying, and Hazardous. You will find a PDF of the guidelines for submitting your inspection request online through the Acela portal. If you have any questions or need assistance, you can always call the arborist division or email us. The phone number for the arborist division is 404-330-6813, or you can email us at arborist.D as in David, P as in Paul, C as in cat, D as in David, at atlantanga.gov.
Awesome, thank you. All righty. After the legislation passes, will new short-term rentals have to be 100 feet away from grandfathered licenses, or does this create a new map?
But just for correction, after the ordinance passes, it is 1,000 feet away from a short-term rental license that has been already issued. So if there's one that's grandfathered in, anyone within 1,000 feet of that has not obtained their short-term rental license and wishes to do so would not be allowed to get a license.
All right, thank you.
One more thing, Leah, just to add, this is for short-term rentals in single-family structures and duplexes. In multifamily, the 1,000 feet apply. Instead, we have a percentage limitation on the number of units that can be short-term rentals.
Yes, awesome. Thank you. All right, for the tree protection standards, do the requirements differ depending on neighborhood typology and or proximity to transit?
No, there are not different requirements depending on the typology or distance from transit, no.
Awesome, thank you. Also regarding the tree ordinance, what is the AMI required, the area median income required for the developer to be eligible to get a waiver of tree planting or recompense? What percentage of the units need to meet those requirements?
I am looking that up. I don't have it. Oh, here we go. I will have to read from something I don't have it memorized. It's separated into rental developments, for sale, multifamily developments, and single family affordable homes. There is a 50% waiver for those properties. There's an for a 50% waiver, there must be 15% of the units, but no less than one, must be affordable to get 80% AMI. And for 60% AMI, there must be 10%, but not less than one unit in the structure or development. For a 100% waiver, there must be 20% of the units that are affordable, but no less than one unit. And that's for 50% AMI. And for 60% AMI, there must be 40% of the units that are affordable, but no less than one. For affordable for sale multifamily developments, there must be, for 80% AMI, there must be 10% of the units that are affordable, but no less than one. And for 120% AMI, there must be 10% of the units that are affordable, but no less than one.
Who determines which trees are allowed to be removed? Is there a requirement that neighbors be notified of a request to remove trees, especially for lots on which houses have also been removed? If a developer removes trees and states that the trees were diseased, how can neighbors or interested parties get a copy of the approval to remove trees?
So we have two different processes for permitting trees to be removed. What I spoke about just a few minutes ago is the dead, dying, and hazardous inspection. And if trees are approved under the dead, dying, and hazardous permit, there is no notification to neighbors. If a tree or trees are approved under a building permit, healthy trees, then we have a signposting process, and there are two signs that are posted. The first sign is posted when we get the project, when the arborist division receives the project, we post an orange sign, and when preliminary approval of the project has been given, then the applicant has to request the yellow sign to be posted, and that's posted near the road so that anybody driving by can read it. And as far as getting a copy of it, you can get a copy of the plan after the permit has been issued. But if the permit is still under review, then you would need to submit an open records request to ask for a copy of that plan. And who determines which trees are allowed to be removed depends on which category, which permitting process we're going through. If it's the dead, dying, and hazardous permitting process, it's the field arborist to assess the trees on site, and they are the ones who approve or deny. And there are 5 plan reviewers who review construction plans, and they are the ones who approve healthy trees to come down.
All right, awesome, thank you. What is the definition of a party house?
So based on what the ordinance is written, the ordinance states that a party house is defined as a single family, two family, or multifamily dwelling unit and its premises that is used for a private gathering, which includes a ceremony, reception, large-scale gathering, or party that charges a fee for the use of the property or an entry fee, donation, or operation costs from its attendees to gain entry. This shall not include events for 501c3 nonprofits, a business, civic, professional, or political organizations or campaigns. That is the definition of the party house as proposed as it is in the ordinance.
Awesome, thank you. All righty. The previous answer was that short-term rentals are first come, first served because we didn't want it to be a lottery. Why didn't you want it to be a lottery? Why do you think allowing first movers to have a permanent advantage is somehow more equitable than a lottery?
So let me clarify this. We worked with the council members, couple stakeholders, and some community, other community interests to draft or at least amend the current short-term rental ordinance. In doing so, there were a lot of amendments that were made, stricken, and added. In that, those recommendations were then drafted and given to our legal advisors. Throughout that time, the option of whether or not to use the lottery system or to space out the properties between 2,500 feet, 3,000 feet, 500 feet, or 200 feet, all of those discussions were had. The consensus came back with a first come, first served basis, grandfathering clauses, increasing the fees for the ordinance, for licenses, and things of that nature. And so this was more of a consensus of the group that we worked with, various stakeholders and council members to propose this ordinance for the betterment of the communities.
Thank you so much. Tree preservation requirements apply only to single-family properties, but not to commercial, multifamily, or industrial properties. This inequitable approach is based on outdated data ranging from 7 to 17 years old. Are you not concerned about the harm this will cause, especially to our most vulnerable communities, where homeowners' primary investments are their single-family houses?
The one of the purposes for not having tree preservation requirements on commercial, multifamily, and industrial is to allow flexibility to get density on those parcels. Density as in how many people are on the parcel, who live on the parcel. There are still trees required to be planted on the property or to be on the property, whether they're existing or proposed. And if there is a commercial property or a non-single family property that abuts up against a single family property, then there's actually a 20-foot buffer that's required by zoning. So there are still some requirements for having trees on the property.
And I will add to that you're not the first person to bring up this question about commercial and industrial and multifamily properties. We put all of this out into the world so that we can get feedback from you, and we do appreciate it.
All right, thank you so much. That was a thoughtful question, a thoughtful answer. All right, regarding short-term rentals, did you consider other possible means of allocating the privilege, such as auctioning the permits off, switching them between properties each year in a round-robin fashion, etc.? And why? Oh, if you did consider other possible means, why did you reject those means?
The consensus of the group established what's set forth in this ordinance. We considered all possibilities in all ways, and based on this and legal advisement, this was the best, well, we felt we had the best ordinance placed before you.
We did have a number of public hearings and the workshop, and we did consult with city council members on this. I guess I would ask this person, did you participate in any of those? I sure hope you did.
All righty. Why are insurance waivers not included in the new TPO legislation? This omission is already causing issues with the Tree Protection Commission.
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's been brought to my attention for the first time, I guess it was about a month ago. And this is something that we really have to look at. And I thank you for bringing it up here.
Thank you. Are we not concerned? Oh, I think this may have been, maybe this is also TPO. Are we not concerned about the impact of this new ordinance on generational wealth for legacy homeowners? Or maybe that's short-term rental. That short-term rental, TPO. Yeah, it felt like a continuation of a previous question, so.
This question was raised by the real estate development community, Mr. or Ms. Anonymous Attendee. Are you a member of that community? Because it's a good question.
Why is the TPO creating a tree ordinance that could take precedence over our zoning ordinance?
Oh, another great question, and another question that the real estate development community has raised. And here's the issue that they've raised. The zoning ordinance that we're working on right now, and y'all know that parts of it are out in the public realm for review, and we're still working on it. It won't be finished until early next year, early 2026, and ready for adoption. And some members of our real estate development community, developers and builders, there is a difference, have brought up that they don't yet know how the tree protection ordinance and the zoning ordinance will work together. And they would really like to see that, to be able to tell how it will impact their ability to develop land and build new housing, in particular, affordable housing.
Moving on to the next question. I love that our attendees tonight are students of the Atlanta City Design. I'm a fan. Atlanta City Design emphasizes core values of equity, progress, ambition, access, and nature. However, the new TPO seems to prioritize nature over equity. Are these values ranked in order of importance?
No, of course not.
No, that's the answer. No, they're not. Oh, where did the question go? It disappeared. Okay. Sorry, it looks like we're moving into, okay. LLCs are already consuming much of the available housing stock, and the current first come, first serve approach for short-term rental licenses is not working. Implementing a lottery system may be a more equitable solution. Without changes, this policy will further impact residents and continue to greater inequity. Can this policy be revised to ensure fairer access to short-term rental opportunities?
We're looking for comments on any and all of the papers that are presented to you. So you can definitely submit your suggestions and recommendations, and we can propose and look at how that may affect this ordinance.
Thank you. Does a clarity, does a registered professional need to secure a permit for each contract to cut trees?
Absolutely. Those professionals who are registered with the city are still required to follow all of the rules that everybody else is about, are required to obtain a permit to remove any tree.
All right, thank you. Who can afford to hire a private tree company to maintain trees? Not the seniors in my neighborhood. Will you consider subsidizing these costs, perhaps using funds from the tree recompense to support low-income and senior residents?
That's something that we're already working on.
So glad you asked that question, Mr. Anonymous Attendee or Ms. Anonymous Attendee. We're already working on that. All right, short-term rental. If the 1,000-foot rule is intended to limit the number of short-term rentals on a block or street, then it seems like allowing both units in a duplex to be short-term rental is undermining that 1,000-foot rule. Plus, it seems like, I'm sorry, I got. This was not a question. I will come back to that if I have time at the end. Sorry about that. All right, tree trust. Can we waive the minimum of 5 acres of forest to acquire land for conservation when priority trees and significant ecological and watershed value can be demonstrated? For example, historic white oaks on a creek.
Can you waive the minimum of 5 acres for forest to acquire land for conservation? I think what's being asked is, can the 5 acres, which is, I think what they're referring to as green fields, can we waive the 5 minimum acres of forest to acquire land for conservation? No, we can't waive the minimum 5 acres. It's not a land swap. So since the property there's no land swaps in the ordinance, so I guess the answer would be no to that question.
All righty, thank you so much. How can an owner be cited if their lease specifically dictates that short-term rental is not allowed?
It's the owner of the property who is responsible. If their lease strictly prohibits short-term rentals, then that becomes a civil matter between the tenant and the owner, but we will cite the owner who is the responsible party for that property.
Thank you so much. In short-term rental question, in zoning 2.0, there are no parking minimums for certain parking zones. Does this supersede the proposed short-term rental ordinance?
Want to get that one?
I'm not familiar with you though.
Okay. So the short-term rentals ordinance isn't part of the zoning code. It's a licensing ordinance. It's the rules for obtaining a license. So the rules in the zoning ordinance would apply unless it's required for the license, in which case they would have to just figure that out.
How can you grandfather a short-term rental license that was obtained based on a requirement of residency that wasn't enforceable because it was illegal?
So I don't know about y'all, but I do what my lawyer tells me, right? And so when the city attorney advises us to update our ordinance to not include residency as a requirement to obtain a license, that's what we do.
Sounds good. Thank you so much. Let's see. If short-term rentals, legally, if the tenant is paying rent to the owner, he cannot just terminate the contract and would have to go through probate or evictions. Will the owners be forgiven fines if they are trying to terminate the relationship with the tenant?
That would be for the owner to speak to the judge regarding getting leniency and trying to come into compliance.
Thank you. Back to the TPO. So the administrative process will never have to give public notice of the side setback change to anyone, including the neighbor immediately next to the affected setback, and therefore no one will have an opportunity to object to the setback change. I read that as a statement, but there's a question mark there.
Gotcha. So it's an administrative variance. It doesn't go to the Board of Zoning Adjustment. It's a staff decision. And just so you know, every staff decision that we make on anything zoning can be appealed to the Board of Zoning Adjustment. So if you're that neighbor and you don't like the decision, you can appeal it to the Board of Zoning Adjustment.
Thank you. All right, short-term rental. Has enforcement been discussed with the police? My encounter was that any tenant dispute falls under civil matters and police won't handle it.
So yes, we have been in discussions with APD, and we will continue to have them. You're absolutely correct. Tenant disputes are a civil matter. However, illegal use of a property is a zoning violation, and if they do not have a short-term rental license, there will be enforcement and citation will be set forth.
Greg, while I have you, how do you check to see whether your previously issued short-term rental license is active?
If you have access to a seller, you can access a seller through a seller and check your short-term rental license based on the number or based on your address. You can also call the office and ask one of our staff, and they will check the status of your short-term rental license as well.
I will ask you, Greg, if you don't mind, to use that chat button at the bottom to drop the link to a seller citizen in the chat and the telephone number that you're suggesting they call, if you don't mind. Thank you so much. All righty. Is there a different license before you do that? Another question.
I'm not that good at multitasking.
Is there, I'll get some questions for David to give you a chance. Is there a different license for someone wanting to rent a room versus wanting to rent a whole house?
No, there isn't. It's the same short-term rental license.
Awesome, thank you. And what was the number of, I don't know which one this is, which ordinance this refers to, so I'm gonna come back to that. Yes, I answered that already. I'll come back to that. We want tree preservation to be applied equitably. Can you amend the new ordinance to include commercial, multifamily, and industrial properties, ensuring fair and consistent tree protection across all property types?
So this, I'm assuming this means putting the same tree preservation standards on all types of land uses. I'm assuming that's what this person is saying. And it's true that how can I explain this? On the commercial and industrial properties, you can remove and David, correct me if I'm wrong here, you can remove all the trees and then plant. It gives greater flexibility to developing those properties.
Right.
And on single family, it's much stricter.
Yes.
But I think what this person is asking is, could we have the same standards for all land use types. So single family, multifamily, commercial, industrial, all the same. So whether that would be the same for tree preservation or for taking down the trees and replanting. And this is not an approach that has been used in the tree protection ordinance to date. Am I right, David?
Yes.
Okay, so that would be a change in the way the ordinance is written, and it would be sort of a sea change, if you will. So if that is the direction that the city council and the mayor's office want us to go in, we would need to go back to the drawing board, I think, to work on the tree protection ordinance. So that would change the timing on the adoption because we would have to go back to the drawing board. If this is the way that you feel, I would suggest that you speak to your elected officials about it, because we're going to move forward with the ordinance as it is written, unless we are directed by the powers that be, by our elected officials to change it. David, get that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
All righty. So to clarify my tree trust fund question, and thank you, Kelly, for clarifying. Sorry if we got the question wrong. I'm not asking about a land swap. I'm asking whether the city can acquire less than 5 acres to become permanently protected, such as 3 acres of high value land with priority trees to become a city nature park.
So in the ordinance, in the current ordinance, it was changed. It was updated 5 or 6 or 7 years ago to include the ability to use tree trust funds to purchase forested land. At the time that that legislation was presented, the minimum size of the property is actually 5 acres, and that has not changed going into the proposed ordinance. So that means that the property would have to be 5 acres or larger for the city to consider purchasing it to save it in perpetuity.
All righty. And I think we've answered all the questions. There was one I was waiting on the asker to clarify. Oh, I'm sorry. Here's another one. Do MPUs have standing to appeal staff decisions to the BZA? That's a legal question. Are you?
My video turned back on. There we go. That is a legal question, and I am not a lawyer, so I am not going to answer that, but it's a great question, because my understanding, and let me say it again, I am not a lawyer. It would be the neighbors. In my experience as a city planner, it would be the neighbors that would have standing to appeal. But again, not a lawyer. Please consult with your attorney.
All righty, I'm going to get into some of these comments because we have a couple minutes. Thank you, Greg, for dropping those links and that information in the chat. I'm very grateful you're allowing the administrative setback variance to protect priority trees. Thank you for sharing that, Kelly. I feel like we already answered this. We did. Michael wants to add, for the record, the 3 questions that he asked are questions that were raised at NPUW's Land Use and Zoning Committee meeting. So they will be asked at NPUW when they meet, which I think is 3rd Wednesdays these days. Trees Atlanta and no other tree advocates on the TPO rewrite task force received the ordinance directly from the city. We had it provided to us indirectly via a person who received it from the city. This happened with both versions of the ordinance. The January 28th ordinance was provided to me by a member of NPUB who received it from the city, and then I provided it to Trees Atlanta.
Can I talk about that?
Mhm.
This is very concerning to me, and this is just now coming to my attention. So I want you all to know that I will look into this further and find out what the problem was, and we'll see to it that you receive everything in a timely manner from this point forward.
All right, thank you. Short-term rental, if the 1,000-foot rule is intended to limit the number of short-term rentals on a block or street, then it seems like allowing both units in a duplex to be short-term rental is undermining that 1,000-foot rule. Plus, it seems like a duplex is a multifamily unit and should be subject to that 10% limitation too.
So here we go. Duplexes are often considered to be single-family structures, but with a adjoining wall. So attached single-family residential. That's how the census views them. And anything that's 3 or more units attached are multifamily structure.
Awesome, thank you. David, this is kind of a question. I'm going to frame it as a question. Would you mind explaining the rationale for the requirements for the public property trees?
As I read the statement, it says, I believe I heard some different requirements for public property trees. If yes, list again and explain. Public property, the requirements for removal of trees on public property is different from private property, but the standard will remain the same, and that standard is inch for inch replacement. I'm not sure what you thought you heard about having different requirements, but perhaps it was about how trees that offsite trees will not be necessarily required, that when you consider the cost of planting or the recompense that would be required to plant trees offsite, those can be applied to other things like forestry management and planting trees, better planting methods for trees. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you so much, David. What was the number of people who actually gave input? Having been part of NPU meetings the last 3 years and missing only a handful of meetings, I had not noticed any of these ordinances discussed by neighbors or NPUs. Short-term rental, I think letting the NPUs decide the distance between them is a good idea. I personally would rather have every house on my block have an ADU, that's an accessory dwelling unit, as an Airbnb than see any primary structure being used as a short-term rental.
Can I speak to that?
Yeah. Mhm.
Sure. So just so you know, and I think we've announced this at all of the NPUs, changes to the zoning ordinance always come to the NPUs, and the party house ordinance is in the zoning ordinance. The short-term rentals ordinance is a licensing ordinance, and we're allowed to bring them to the NPUs because of the change in the fees. The fees will go from $150 per license to $250. So we don't have to bring it to you, but we're allowed to bring it to you for review and comment on the fees. I felt like it was a really good idea for us to bring the short-term rentals ordinance to the NPUs so that y'all could see the big picture on things. So you could see how the party house ordinance goes along with the short-term rentals ordinance. And I'm really happy that we've gotten all this input from all y'all tonight. And I hope that we get more from you when we're coming out to your meetings.
Awesome, I thank you. Just clearing some of these questions I've already covered. All right. The last few comments that we have are, we want tree preservation to be applied more equitably. While we acknowledge the current efforts, can the ordinance be amended to include some level of preservation? Did I not read that question already?
Yeah, we've been through that.
Okay. All righty. Can staff clear it or somehow? Thank you. All righty. How would a neighbor find out if a developer was granted an administrative setback variance for tree preservation? How would a neighbor find out if a developer was granted an admin setback variance for tree preservation?
I believe that has plans.
It's open records would be the. For now, it sounds like the answer might be through an open records request. I see staff jotting that question down, so we'll probably be able to get a definitive answer for you and get that answered. All right, so just to clarify, NPUs do not have standing to appeal staff decisions to the BZA, and the change to the tree ordinance to allow setbacks to the modified as an administrative decision would not cut neighbors out of the decision-making process entirely, but it would cut out the NPUs themselves. For the next tree ordinance update, please require preservation for multifamily, commercial, and industrial. It doesn't make sense for it to be written exactly the same as single family, but there should be some standards for preservation. Clear cutting land has major environmental impacts. Thank you, Janae. Trees Atlanta and the rest of the task force tree advocates have felt intentionally excluded from the process with the submittal of the first TPO to City Council. We learned about it secondhand and had to ask Andrew for a copy. Then it happened again with the second TPO. This time we got it from a kind soul in MPUB who knew we were being left out of the process.
This is terrible. This is a big mistake on our part, and I hate it that this happened. And I am going to dig into this first thing tomorrow, and we will make sure that this sort of thing does not happen again.
Thank you. For the tree trust fund, can this be updated outside of the tree ordinance? I would like to see a waiver that allows smaller parcels to be purchased when significant ecological and/or watershed value can be demonstrated. In the city, we don't have very many 5-acre opportunities left, and we are losing opportunities to preserve functioning ecosystems in our urban environment. Last statement, second to last, can the ordinance be, I read this one already. I think the person wants me to read it because this is the third time it's appeared. Can the ordinance be amended to include some level of preservation for commercial, multifamily, and industrial properties rather than exempting them entirely? Some preservation is better than none. All righty. And then the last comment that we have was attached to a question. So I skipped the comment part and only read the question. But since we have another minute left, I'll read the full comment. I do not agree with 100% waivers. How can we support builders and developers to modify their designs, planning, and land development processes to be sustainable? We need affordability and ecological/climate resilience, and they've been pitted against each other. I'd like to suggest we utilize our brilliant universities to the max to work on solutions. Ladies and gentlemen, we have answered 92 questions and moved 9 others over because they were answered in addition to other questions. I want to thank you all so much. I'm not going to end this until we have final words from our commissioner and anybody else that wants to say anything, but I thank you so much for being here, for taking time out of your Thursday night to be with us and to stick around while we answer these questions. As I mentioned at the beginning, for anyone that came late, we're gonna drop the link in the chat one more time for the main page where all of this information is posted. If you don't see it tonight, give us a day or so to get things updated, but the fact sheets, the ordinances are already there on our website. We're gonna upload the webinar as well, which is streaming live on YouTube, so you can find that on YouTube easily if you follow us on NPU Atlanta, which you should, because we have a lot of good stuff. Some of our NPU University classes are also streamed on YouTube. But you can find this webinar on YouTube as well as Saturday's webinar. We will host that, we will upload that to our website, the link that will be in the chat for you. Like I said, the fact sheets are there, the ordinances are there. We're gonna take some time and curate an FAQ document that will also cover some of the questions that we heard more than once. We'll put those together and get those questions answered for you as well. The last thing that I wanna say is that the party house ordinance, the short-term rental ordinance, and the tree protection recompense ordinance will all be on your February agendas. Those of you that met the first week in February or the first part of the second week in February, you will have until March 12th to get your recommendations in for those items. The tree protection ordinance and creation of the administrative variance, that will appear on your February and March agendas. So you will have 2 cycles to make a recommendation on the tree protection ordinance creation of an administrative variance. You also have tons of other opportunities which are in the presentation, which we'll upload to the website. You can certainly comment at the public hearing at CDHS, that's the Community Development Human Services Committee of City Council. You can also comment at the, you can send correspondence to your council members if you have concerns about the ordinance, and you can certainly reach out to us. As a matter of fact, when our commissioner and my colleagues give their closing comments, closing remarks, what I will do is put up the screen that has everybody's contact information for those that may not have been able to catch it. I'm going to share that with you one last time. Please do feel free, do not hesitate to reach out to us if you have questions. If you have any questions at all, please do not hesitate to reach out to us and let us answer your questions. For some reason, it won't let me share my screen again. I don't know why. Let me try this once more. Okay, here we go. So please do feel free if you've got questions about the party house, the information is there. Questions about short-term rentals, the information is there. Questions about the tree protection ordinance, that information is there on your screen. As I mentioned, our commissioners will see you at some point this month. And that is it for me. Commissioner Prince, Greg, David, any closing remarks?
I just want to say thank you so much to all of you for spending your Thursday evening with us and for your thoughtful questions and comments. I hope we were able to address them. If we weren't able to address them, there's contact info on here for all of us, and reach out. And if it's something we've got to research, we can research it. If you are one of the people that was sort of advocating for great big changes, you may want to reach out to your elected officials. There's probably only so much we can do for a substitute ordinance coming up within the next, month or so. So please, if you want to see things completely rewritten, let your elected officials know. And the timeline Leah has explained for both ordinances, but the adoption date for short-term rentals would be in April, and tree protection ordinance, April, May 5th-ish. So if you're interested in giving us feedback, you can give it to all the staff listed here or to your elected officials. And again, thank you so much for your time and for your thoughtful questions.
Thank you.